All right. Tuesday, July 29th. It's almost August. It's almost football season. We are in the thick of it. Everything is happening quickly. Teams are starting their fall camps, and it is officially pod prediction positivity season. That is what it is. I am headed to Miami on Thursday. We had a ton of podcasts come out last week around ACC kickoff. Our guy Pete B is back from Alaska, which is huge. He had an awesome trip. Checking out some of the pictures from that. And I wanted to get this out. I want to basically run through all of the ACC teams' current over-unders and tell you what bet I will most likely be placing. I think I'm going to place these after I record this today, before there's all of the casual money or the I'm listening to what the people out there are saying, and then the line starts to move around. I wanted to kind of beat that. Maybe it's too late, but who knows? A couple of housekeeping items before we go ahead and we do that. Number one, thank you to everybody who booked their lodging for week 1 against South Carolina in Atlanta through us. We currently have the Spring Hill Suites in Atlanta, which is in Buckhead, still available. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to link that in the YouTube video. It's also all over our social media. So if you are still looking for lodging, that closes. I believe we have like a week or 10 days left where you can get this rate that is only available through Sons of Saturday. So check that out. Spring Hill Suites in Atlanta, Buckhead. You can book from Friday. You can book from Saturday. The world is your oyster. You make it happen. We also have tickets still available for our event. We are going to have live music. We're going to have a bar tab. Coach Foster is going to be there. It's going to be fantastic. I'll also link that in as well. That'll be the day before the game on Saturday, and that will be at Park Tavern in Atlanta before week 1 against South Carolina. But without further ado, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through each team, starting with the lowest win total all the way up until the top. I will give you where I stand, why I stand there, and the case for and against the teams beating those numbers. So without further ado, that brings us to Stanford, who sits at a 3.5 win total and plus 8,000 to make the college football playoff. The case for over 3.5 is pretty short. They are a little bit of a mystery, and 3.5 is a very, very, very small number. Looking at their schedule, week 0, they are at Hawaii. They are at BYU in week 2. And then they round out non-conference play with San Jose State and Notre Dame at home. Look, my questions against going over 3.5 here are, does Frank Reich really care? That's not an indictment on Frank Reich's, his personality. It's more so he was asked, and he's doing this as a favor for Andrew Luck. And this is very much clearly and understood by a lot of people. This is a lost year for Stanford. And we just talked about their non-conference. Hawaii at BYU, San Jose State, Notre Dame may not be favored in any of those games at all. So the verdict for me, it's an under. I thought really long and hard about am I really going to take the under on 3.5? I am. I don't see 4 wins in the schedule. So Stanford, we're going with the under. Wake Forest, 4.5 is where their win total sits. They're plus 5,500 to make the playoff. Here's the case for Wake Forest. Kennesaw State, Western Carolina, Delaware, and Oregon State are their non-conference. Wow. Super winnable. All of those games, super winnable. And that gets you to on the doorstep of where you need to be to hit that over. Now, the case against, you had back-to-back 4-8 seasons. You're maybe going to be favored in 1 game this season in conference. If you look at their schedule here, they got NC State, Georgia Tech, at Virginia Tech, SMU, Florida State, that's at Florida State, at UVA, North Carolina, and at Duke. I mean, it's a tough assignment. They did lose Donovan Green. They lost a lot of players through the transfer portal, and they're doing a lot of replacing. You got a new coach. But I'm going to go over. I'm going to go over on the 4.5, and here's why. Let's say that you go 4-0 or you go 3-1 in your non-conference games. When you get to November, you play Florida State, UVA, UNC, and Duke. Those are 4 teams that you could pretty easily convince me have either decided to quit on the season or have a coach that is leaving, whether they have been fired, going to the NFL, retiring, or whatever other reason. Like, if you're telling me you're ending the season with Florida State, I have no idea what's going on there, UVA, who could be on an interim, UNC, who, Bill could have ran off into the sunset with Jordan at that point. He could be, getting ready to coach in the NFL. And then you got at Duke, you got Manny Diaz. Maybe he's looking at another job. Maybe he's looking to take a bigger job. So I'll actually go over Wake Forest, 4.5 wins, which may surprise some people. Moving on to the Virginia Wahoos, which their over-under was set at 5.5, and it has climbed to 6.5. They're plus 2,500 to make the playoff. What is the case for the Wahoos? Chandler Morris, he's coming in from North Texas, balled out, 3,700 yards, 31 touchdowns at North Texas. You avoid playing Clemson, you avoid playing Miami, you avoid playing SMU. None of those teams are on the schedule. And this is also the deepest roster that Tony E has had in his time at UVA. What's the case against UVA? 54 newcomers is a lot, with 32 of them coming from the transfer portal. UVA has not had a winning season since 2018. Again, I've said this about Tony Elliott. I like the guy, but I just don't know if he's cut out to be the head coach of the Wahoos or a head coach in general. I think he's a really good coordinator. I think he's a really good guy. And again, you'd have to say that hand in hand with saying that he was dealt a really, really crappy hand. So I really liked 5.5. I would have gone over with 5.5. I think this is a 6-win team, so I will have to go under at that 6.5 number. Moving on, Syracuse. They are sitting at 5.5 with plus 2,200 to make the playoff. As far as the schedule goes, this is the hardest schedule, one of the hardest schedules probably in the ACC. They have 11 teams on the schedule that made a bowl last year and 5 projected top 25 teams. If you want to make the case for this going over 5.5, the real only case you can make is that Fran Brown is that guy. Fran Brown, I really like him a lot. I don't think that he's long for Syracuse. I don't know how long he's going to be there, but I have a really hard time going over 5.5. You lost your quarterback. You lost your top rusher, you lost your top receiver, and you lost your top tackler all to the NFL. You're only returning 3 guys on your entire defense. So I'm going to have to go under here, but I can see, and I do predict that Fran Brown will ruin somebody's year. I'm looking at their schedule right now. Tennessee to kick off the season, at Clemson, at SMU, at Georgia Tech, at Miami, and at Notre Dame. I can see Fran Brown winning one of those games that he has no business winning, but just stepping away and winning one of those games. So we'll see what happens. But incredible first year for Fran Brown. Too much to replace. So I'll have to go under 5.5. Pittsburgh. They started at 5.5 and rose to 6.5. They are plus 1,800 to make the playoff this year. I know I'm reading the make the playoff number. It's not going to happen for most of these teams, but it adds some color. And if you're a fan of one of these schools, maybe you're like, I'll put $5 on it, but I wouldn't do it for Pitt. The case for Pittsburgh going over 6.5. Last year was a biblical collapse. Really bad. We've never seen anything like it. Starting 6-0, finishing 0-7. I mean, I can't remember it ever happening before. This team has a ton of talent. I mean, Eli Holstein was one of the best freshman quarterbacks in all of college football last year. He got banged up towards the end of the year, but he definitely has the talent. And then you look at the roster. You have a couple of preseason All-Americans. Kyle Lewis is pretty much a consensus preseason All-American. Desmond Reed at running back is an absolute stud. I love that guy. Call him the little engine that could. He's actually a little engine that can, and I expect nothing less from him this upcoming season. They are home against Miami and Notre Dame in November. Those are 2 places that I don't think those teams are going to want to go. Maybe Notre Dame doesn't mind because they're used to the cold, but Miami has no interest in going to Pittsburgh to end this season. Actually, they're ending the season on week 14 in Pittsburgh. So that's interesting. And also they'll be hosting Louisville in September. Now, the case against this, Pat Narduzzi is 19-19 since winning the ACC. Not great. Winning one game in November is not only possible, but very, very likely. At Stanford, Notre Dame, at Georgia Tech, and Miami. Again, like, you can talk yourself into Pittsburgh beating one of Notre Dame and Miami. It's not very likely. So I'm going to go with the under 6.5. Again, at 5.5, maybe I'm taking it 6.5. I'm not. But Pat Narduzzi, much like Dave Doran, is one of those guys where you say, man, on the hot seat, he's probably out next year. And then he goes out and he shuts everybody up. So we will see what happens with Pittsburgh. Rolling right along to Boston College. 5.5 is the over-under and plus 3,000 to make the playoff. What is the case for Boston College? Well, you could say Tommy Castellanos and the locker room situation seemed pretty awful last season. Didn't seem like a lot of fun. Seemed like people were having a pretty crappy time, Tommy included. They're easy games at the top of this schedule. If you look at Boston College's schedule, you got Fordham at home. You go to Michigan State. You go to Stanford. And then you have Cal at home. And then you go to Pitt. So, if you kind of make it happen here at the top of your schedule, you're feeling pretty good about your situation. That Michigan State game, though, is the biggest one that you got to step away with. So, case against the end of the season is a pretty brutal stretch. If you look at week 7 to week 12, you go Clemson, Connecticut, at Louisville, Notre Dame, SMU, Georgia Tech. That is a tough stretch. I know you have UConn in there, but essentially, what is it? 5 out of 6 weeks, you're playing Clemson, Louisville, Notre Dame, SMU, Georgia Tech. It's a tough assignment. But I'm going to trust Bill O'Brien. I'm going to trust my guy. If you beat Michigan State in week 2, I'm going to go with a soft over of 5.5. Now, I will feel awful about that if Boston College goes ahead and loses to Michigan State on the road in week 2. That will all but be dead. But I'll go with Bill O'Brien. I think Bill O'Brien is one of those guys who doesn't want to coach at Boston College forever, just my opinion. So, he's going to have to continue to punch above his weight class here to either land the next job or be attractive for somebody else to bring him in. And that brings us to the Virginia Tech Hokies at 6.5. If you're subscribed to this podcast, you're very familiar with the schedule. If you're not subscribed to this podcast, I ask you to subscribe if you're enjoying the content. But the schedule is as follows. South Carolina in Atlanta, Vanderbilt, Old Dominion, and Wofford at home. NC State on the road, Wake at home, Georgia Tech on the road, Cal, Louisville, Florida State on the road, Miami at home, Virginia. The case against Virginia Tech, if you're 0-2 after you play South Carolina and Vanderbilt, you're not only playing against every single team on your roster, you're also playing against bad vibes in Blacksburg and on the internet and on social media. So that's one thing that you have to think about. Also, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Florida State, and Miami all on the schedule. It's easy every year when you get your schedule and you're like, oh man, we can, you can talk yourself into winning all these games. That's a tough little situation. It's also crazy that when Virginia Tech decides to put Vanderbilt on the schedule, it's when Vanderbilt is the best that they've probably ever been, or at least have been since James Franklin is there. So that's a little bit of a bummer. Now, in terms of Hopium, two new coordinators, so people don't necessarily know what you're going to look like. We have a new strength coach who I fully expect is going to have the team in better shape. You're going to have a better offensive line. And last year, most losses were self-inflicted. So, again, I know I've been saying this ever since Media Day. If you're better in the decision-making standpoint within the last 4 minutes of the first half and the end of the football game, and you're stronger and mentally tougher, You should have a way better season than you had last year. But that is all yet to be seen. So due to my fanhood and due to those points we just talked about, I will go over 6.5 wins for the Virginia Tech Hokies. Bringing us to the NC State Wolfpack, who sit at 6.5 with plus 1,600 to make the playoff. To Sam Jesse's point, where there is Virginia Tech, there is NC State. They have a symbiotic relationship and are always sitting right next to each other. What's the case for NC State winning more than 6.5 games? Well, Louisville's not on the schedule. Clemson's not on the schedule. SMU is not on the schedule. Case against NC State. You got 2 new coordinators. I know you're bringing a quarterback back. This just seems like a program that doesn't have a lot of juice, and it seems like a program very similar to with Mr. Keats when he was at NC State before he went to the Final Four, where people are kind of just – somebody asked me on one of my former podcasts a couple ago, why do you think Dave Dorn is on the hot seat? I think people are just kind of sick of meddling in the middle. I personally wouldn't want to get rid of Dave Dorn. I think he's done a pretty good job at NC State, but it seems like they're getting to the point where they want a different voice and they want a different direction at NC State. Maybe I'm wrong. If you're an NC State fan, chime in here and tell me every reason I'm wrong. But it seems like people are getting a little frustrated with being in the same spot all the time. I'm going to go over here, though. Dorn, in his tenure at NC State, has had 3 losing seasons in Raleigh. Last year was one of them. They went 6-7. But in 2013, he went 3-9, followed that up with an 8-5 season. In 2018, he went 4-8, followed that up with an 8-4 season. So, I'm going to go over here. I think Dave Dorn is one of those guys, when his back is up against the wall, he makes it happen. And I'm expecting nothing less out of NC State this year. So I hope that didn't come across as I think he should be fired. I just think that is where the heartbeat of the pack is right now. Now we're going to Duke. 6.5 over under, plus 1,300 to make the playoff. What is the case for the Blue Devils to go over 6.5? Darian Mensah is one of, if not the best newcomer to the ACC. Coming over from Tulane, really good stats, really good get for Duke. A lot of people were surprised when he ended up signing with Duke. So he's a huge get. Duke also does not play Louisville or Miami. They're not on the schedule. The case against, I got to be honest with you guys, I don't really have one. I can't really come up with a reason as to why I don't think Duke will win 6.5 games. And, we kind of have to take the it's Duke out of our vocabulary here. I love the over 6.5 for Duke. This is their best decade in program history. They have won 8+ games 6 times since 2014. I'll repeat that again. The Duke Blue Devils have won 8 or more games 6 times dating back to 2014. I'll just read through their schedule. They got Elon, Illinois, who's going to be a really good football team. At Tulane, which pisses me off. I don't know why we're going to Tulane as an ACC school. But then NC State at home, Syracuse and Cal on the road, bye. Georgia Tech at home, bye. So you're sandwiching Georgia Tech with a bye. The bye stuff really screws some teams in the ACC and helps them out. But back to it. Then you're at Clemson, at UConn, Virginia at home, North Carolina at home, or North Carolina on the road, and then Wake Forest. So I love Duke to go over 6.5. So I will go with Duke over 6.5. Cal, they opened at 6.5. They're up to 5. They're down to 5.5. They're at plus 3,000 to make the playoff. I mean, the case for Cal is they have 4 toss-ups before week 5. You're at Oregon State. Then you have Texas Southern. Then you have Minnesota. Then you're at San Diego State. The case against Cal over 5.5, you lost your quarterback, you lost your leading receiver, and you lost your leading rusher. And the vibes around this program are awful. Really, really bad. You lost Jaden Ott. He went to Oklahoma. Running back who people should feel really, really good about. I don't see 6 wins on this schedule. I see a lot of automatic losses on this schedule. But this team going 6-6 would be extremely impressive for them to do. So I will unfortunately have to go with the under for the Cal Golden Bears. Saw a cool video, though, on Twitter today of Deshaun Watson returning a kick for a touchdown at Cal. Stands were full. It looked like it was shot on one of those like flip cameras. I don't know if you remember those, but they were pretty cool. It was like a camera with a USB in it. It was nice. I'm old. Georgia Tech, 7.5 over under, plus 750 to make the playoff. This is the hottest pick in the ACC. This is what everybody is talking about. Everybody loves Georgia Tech, or everybody at least has an opinion. Shout out to Pulp Fiction. Now, what's the case for? They don't play Louisville. They don't play Miami. They have a very, very light road schedule. They do play Colorado on the road to start the season, but then it's Wake Forest, Duke, NC State, and Boston College. That is their road situation. And the case for Haynes King is healthy again. I love Haynes King. I am all in. Tough guy. And if you remember last year, he really was just a battering ram. He wasn't able to throw the ball. And, I think when people watched him towards the end of the year, people were like, oh, this guy can't throw. Well, he can't throw because he's got a really banged up shoulder, and they were just running him. Unless you want to talk about the Georgia game. I think he threw the ball a ton in that Georgia game. Not effectively, but I think it was more trying to keep the defense honest than it was 100% what they wanted and felt like they could succeed doing. The case against Georgia Tech, their top receiver, Eric Singleton, he went to Auburn. They do have a tough first month headed to Colorado and then also hosting Clemson. I think it's crazy that Georgia Tech and Clemson is on week 3. It's literally on September 13th. It's crazy that game is so early. That's going to play a huge hand in, I expect Clemson to win that game, but if Georgia Tech is able to punch up and make that happen, they put themselves in a fantastic position for the rest of the year. Obviously, Georgia Tech, like they do every single year, has Georgia to finish the season, and health is pivotal. We saw what Georgia Tech looked like without Haynes King and with Haynes King, and obviously for every team, you could say health is important, but for Georgia Tech, they will go as Haynes King goes. So look, I feel like everybody is rolling with Georgia Tech. I feel like the dark horse for everybody is Georgia Tech. Everybody's talking about Georgia Tech. So with that, I'm also riding with Georgia Tech. If Haynes King and Brent Key were running for president, I would knock on doors. That is going to be my catchphrase this season. I love Georgia Tech, and I love this over at 7.5. So I think 8 or 9 wins for the Jackets minimum this football season. So I'm all in on the Jackets. Florida State is also at 7.5, and they're at plus 1,200 to make the playoff. What's the case for Florida State? Well, they're definitely going to be better than last year. 2-10, super, super embarrassing. You're also going to have that big chip on your shoulder. Everybody's talking trash. Everybody's covering dirt on you. So I think they got a chip on their shoulder. You're also brought in Gus Malzahn and a new quarterback. Gus Malzahn, offensive genius. Tommy Castellanos, got some swag about him. Okay. What's the case against? Well, you got Alabama, Miami, Clemson, and Florida on the schedule. That kind of sucks. If you want to call it a chip on your shoulder, you can also call it a ton of pressure on this program. You can say that it's a relief to not have a lot of pressure, or you're going to have a lot of pressure because a lot of Florida State people are saying you better win this year. And I think my biggest problem with this is quarterback play was awful last year because you brought in someone who was a flawed quarterback, and you knew they were a flawed quarterback in DJ Uiagalelei. So you fix that by bringing in another flawed quarterback who's vertically challenged and, has kind of been up and down in his ACC career. So that's the case that you can make against Florida State. I don't see 8 wins on this schedule. I actually don't see them winning any of their toughest 4 games that are on the schedule, and they would be bound to drop one more. Again, that racket of Alabama, Miami, Clemson, Florida is tough. And I am going to have to go with an under on Florida State. And that puts Mike Norvell in a pretty non-fortuitous situation. So I will go under there. North Carolina, 7.5 plus 1,400 to make the playoff. What's the case for North Carolina? Their schedule is a complete joke. Like eyes have maybe never seen an easier schedule than this one. They're out of conference games. TCU, okay. UCF, okay. Charlotte and Richmond. They're playing at Charlotte. You could argue, I don't know if you could argue this, but I'll just say it. They're out of conference per capita is harder than their conference schedule. I'll say that. This entire schedule, they play they play one of the 5 top projected ACC teams this year. And that game is at home. They play Clemson at home and it's, again, betwixt 2 bye weeks. That is on week 6. They have a bye week on 5 and 7. So if you want to zag North Carolina, this roster is a complete mystery. I couldn't tell you a single thing about this roster. And also you have Bill Belichick. Is he all in? What is the deal? Does he want to be here? Is he going to leave in October? Does he care? Jordan Hudson, what's going on? But here's my point. At the end of the day, it's Bill Belichick. And if this roster is within spitting distance of the teams that he's playing, he's going to win some damn ball games. So I'm going to go over 7.5. I think a lot of people are really, really excited because they feel like they're going to be able to dunk on Coach Belichick in North Carolina. I don't think it's going to happen. I think North Carolina is going to surprise some people is the wrong word because there aren't a lot of games they could surprise people. Like if they won any game on this schedule, it's not going to shock anyone. Like nobody's going to step away from North Carolina beating Cal, Virginia, Syracuse, Stanford, Wake Forest, Duke, NC State, and be like, wow, I can't believe North Carolina won that game. By the way, those games are all played in a row from weekend 8 to the end of the season. So there isn't really like a lot of opportunity for them to have like a moment, which is, which is worth pointing out because they're going to be on ESPN a ton. But I do think that it's possible for you to look at their record at the end of the season or for them to, poke their head up in the top 25 at some point. And you'd be like, wow, I can't believe North Carolina is here. You can argue that most of that is because of their schedule, if it happens, or most of that is because of Bill Belichick. But we'll see. We'll see what the reason is and what the result is. So I'm going to go over. I'm going to go over 7.5. SMU, 8.5 wins over under plus 350 to make the playoff. What's the case for? Lashley, I think he's become the media darling of the ACC, and you also got Jennings back at quarterback. The case against SMU, they're playing at Clemson. They got Miami and Louisville on the schedule, and they're out of conference is sneaky tough with Baylor and at TCU. Look, SMU did a tremendous job last year coming into the ACC, being a Bulldog, and making the playoff, making it to the ACC title. The idea that SMU is only going to drop 3 games out of Baylor, TCU, Clemson, Miami, and Louisville is kind of far-fetched for me. So I am going to go with the under and a sophomore, I don't want to call it a sophomore slump, but definitely a regression from last year. So I will go under on SMU. Louisville. I love Louisville. I love Louisville this year. 8.5 is their over-under, and they're plus 350 as well to make the playoff. What is the case for Louisville? Miller Moss and Jeff Brom. Print the president-style T-shirts for both of them. Moss, Brom, 25. Get out there and vote. I think this is going to be a great match, a great pair-up between these two. Jeff Brom has been absolutely unbelievable at coaching the quarterback position. Miller Moss has every single intangible and skill that you want to have. So I think that's exciting. And then talk about a nice warm-up, man. Like Louisville to start the season, Eastern Kentucky, JMU, bye week, Bowling Green, at Pitt, Virginia at home, bye week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'd be pretty surprised if they're not 5-0 going into their bye week before playing at Miami. That's what I would think. If you want to make the case against Louisville, Clemson's on the schedule. You're playing at Miami and you're playing SMU. And they kind of got screwed by the schedule makers in the ACC. They finished the season with 7 games in a row, and 3 of those games are on the road. So to end the season, they're at Miami on a Friday, Boston College at home, at Virginia Tech, Cal, Clemson on a Friday night. It'll probably be a night game. I don't know if it'll be on Friday night, but it'll be on Friday. Yeah, it'll be on Friday night because they're not going to play at noon on Friday. At SMU and then Kentucky, which is a murderer's row to end the season as far as the ACC is concerned. So what am I going to do here? Louisville's been right there the last 2 seasons. I like them not only to hit the over, I like them to be in Charlotte for the Clemson Invitational. I think that they will be in Charlotte competing against Clemson and losing to Clemson in the ACC title. That is my prediction. So I am going to go over for Louisville. Okay. We have arrived at Miami. They opened at 8.5. It's climbed to 9.5. They're plus 200 to make the playoff. Man, Miami. What's the case for Miami? Well, they're ultra talented. They should take a step forward with their defense because they brought in Corey Weatherman from Minnesota. He was there. Good coordinator. And then you also have Carson Beck. I'm a buyer of Carson Beck. He played in the SEC. He's coming to a league where he's not going to have a huge drop-off in the talent that's on his team, but he is going to have a huge drop-off in the talent level that he's going against week to week. That's not a shot at the ACC. It's just a fact. What is the case against Miami? Well, they're ultra-talented every single year. Every year they're talented. They also, here are some of the games that they'll have to play. Home games, they got Notre Dame, Florida, and Louisville. Those are going to be tough. And then away games, you got SMU, but then in the cold, you have Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh back-to-back weeks to end the season. Oh, that does not sound like something Miami is going to want to do. So you got at SMU on November 1st in week 10. Then you got Syracuse and you got NC State. Those are at home. And then on the road in week 13 and 14, that's going to be November 22nd in Blacksburg, Virginia, and then November 29th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Bring your sleeves. I have a hard time going the over here. More specifically, I see 2 losses before October. And this is a team that is going to need to gel over the course of the year. And why do I say 2 losses before October? Because you got Notre Dame to open the season, then you got Florida on 9-20. So I think this is going to be a solid football team that is probably going to finish 8-4, maybe 7-5. So that is my prediction. I am going to have to go under with Miami. And Clemson, this one's easy. 9.5 minus 200 to make the playoff. I mean, this team has 4 to 5 first-round picks alone on this roster. Ton of leadership on this team. It's like one of those teams when you're filling out your March Madness bracket and you're like, oh man, like, you know, I know that this Kentucky team is really talented, or I know that this Florida team is really talented over the last couple decades. You're like, but this team has 4 seniors. This team is bringing back 2 guys who were captains on the team last year. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting from Clemson. And you look at some of their flaws last year. Their rush defense was 16th in the ACC in terms of yards per game on the ground. Well, they brought in Tom Allen. Tom Allen, former head coach, coming in, taking over the defense. So I feel pretty good about that. If you want to make a case against, here are the 2 cases you can make against Clemson going over 9.5 wins. One of the cases is you got week 1 at LSU and week 14 against South Carolina. Number 1, I'm not that big on South Carolina. I think the hype train has gotten out of control in South Carolina. And number 2, I expect Clemson to beat LSU week 1. I think it's going to be a good game, but I expect Clemson to handle business against LSU in week 1. Maybe that's foolish. Maybe that's ACC homerism. I expect them to handle business against LSU. The other case against Clemson is you hate Dabo. I truly believe those are like the only 2 points that you can make to take Clemson to go under. So I'm going to go over, absolutely zero hesitation with Clemson. So look, I got Louisville versus Clemson in the ACC title. That's what I think is going to happen. I got Clemson winning the ACC title. I got Clemson competing for an ACC championship, or national championship. And that's where I think we are. That is 17 teams in 30-ish minutes. Got some exciting stuff coming down the pike later on this month. I can announce it here. Bruce Arians, quarterback of the Virginia Tech Hokies and former Super Bowl winning head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, will be back on the show. That is the first week of August. And I will be in Miami this week for a bachelor trip. Shout out to my guy, Chris Monaco. Other than that, any topics or ideas that you want to hear, please let us know in the comments. If you made it this far, please write in the comments what your most overrated and underrated ACC team is in the comments and why. Other than that, be well. We're almost there. Camp is starting up, and we'll be talking with y'all soon. Peace out.